All right. Hello and welcome, everyone. Thank you so much for coming to this call. My name is Ellen Kittredge, and I am happy to be here with you and talking with you about a really important topic. I'm getting over a little something slash having allergies, I think. So my voice is a little bit strained, but I feel perfectly fine. So apologies for the slightly strange voice at the beginning here. Um, I'm super happy to be here talking about this topic. I think it's a really, really important one. It's very timely for where we are in our world right now. So for those of you who don't know me, I've been a nutrition counselor and health coach for 16 years, and I have I focus on a lot of different things, but a lot of my work has been around doing nutritional cleanses and supporting people in learning how to eat healthy, um, you know, with food and supplements as needed, but really focusing a lot on food and lifestyle. Um, excuse me, I might be coughing a couple of times. Um, in recent years, in the last year and a half or so, I have decided to really focus a little bit more specifically on the gut microbiome. And the reason for that is because there's so much there that is essential to learn about for supporting people and optimizing their health. And so that has been a huge focus of mine for the last probably year and a half. And I've been spending a lot of time getting really educated about the gut microbiome and working with a lot of clients to support them in this area. The gut really is the key to most health issues. It's really the root of everything. So as Hippocrates said, I believe it was all disease begins in the gut, and we can think of all health begins in the gut as well. So it's a really important place to focus. And with this particular presentation, talking about GLP-1 agonists or these how we can secrete our own GLP-1, which is a way to um, support satiety and to help us to know when we're full and give us correct hunger signals and to reduce cravings and all that kind of thing. All of that is connected to the health of the gut. And there's a lot that we can do with food and lifestyle and other recommendations to really make some huge changes there. So I'm really excited to focus on that. In my book, education is key, and there's usually no simple answer. There's no sort of, oh yes, if everybody just does this, you'll be great and everything will be, wonderful. It's a bit more complex than that, unfortunately. So what I'm hoping to do today is educate you, and I hope you really enjoy this process. And I just recommend to get really curious. So, um, feel free to take notes if you like, or just listen and take it all in, whatever works for you. But if you get curious about your health and listen to what I'm saying and see how that resonates for you and how it relates to your own life experience, that's a really good place to start. And also, I just want to say that this info that I'm sharing today is education. I'm not a doctor, so I'm not diagnosing anyone with any medical conditions. And if you do have any questions like that, you need to talk with your doctor. So everything I'm sharing today is a general recommendation or guidance to be worked with in concert with your, trusted medical professionals. Um, and some of the things that I recommend or talk about may not work for you for any variety of reasons. So again, everything that I'm sharing, just take in what does work and work with that if you choose and let the rest go. So, as I mentioned, good health begins in the gut. So I'm going to do a quick little screen share here, and I'm just going to show you what I mean by this and just give you a little bit of a visual representation because I think it's helpful to see this. So we're going to come back to this slide a couple times. Just going to make this a little bit smaller here. So what we're seeing is we're seeing the gut lining. So we're seeing here this gut lining. This is the inside of the gut, so where our food passes through and is digested. And um, and then we're seeing the mucosal barrier here. This blue is the mucosal barrier. And then this is the epithelial lining, where we have these tight junctions that basically keep the gut barrier really in integrity. So we have our food that is passing through and the microbiome inside of the gut and all the digestion that's happening. But then as far as what's coming actually into our body, we only have things that are going through that are beneficial. So this is a healthy gut. This is what we want it to be. We can think of the gut as almost like an inner tube that goes through the body. So it's actually, even though the gut is inside of us, it's actually it's actually separate from us. Like there is actually a protective barrier between the gut and the rest of the body. So this is what we're seeing. It's a very, very thin mucosal barrier and very thin lining here in these tight junctions, which we'll come back to, and I'll talk about why that's important to consider. And here we have a leaky gut, and this is where we have a lot of mucus degradation. So this blue barrier here, which is the mucus, is being degraded. And then we have a lot of toxin-producing pathogens that are leaking through, going into the rest of the body. So once these leak through and go into the rest of the body, we get inflammation, which you see here at the bottom, okay? So I'm going to come back to this, this in much more detail a couple times because this is a really helpful visual to kind of understand what we're looking at. But a lot of what we're talking about today and how we're going to be able to address our healthy weight, and as I titled the call, How to Eat for a Healthy Midsection, is connected to specifically to what I was just showing you there. So let me just get my notes back here. Okay, so we have approximately 3 to 4 pounds of microbes in our gut, as many as 500 different species. And as far as in the actual numbers, we're talking about trillions of microbes total in our entire body. There's an incredibly complex ecosystem that's continually changing, adapting, growing, dying off, reproducing, and, dying again, and just basically in continual sort of change. It's also in constant conversation with our immune system, our brain, our nervous system, and all of the organs of our digestive system. So we have this incredible array of these microbes in there that are hopefully maintaining a good, healthy balance. And if they're not, then that's where we start to see problems, or start to see health problems. There's something called the gut-brain axis, which is this bidirectional communication. So basically between the central nervous system and the brain, and the enteric nervous system, which is the gut. This is why when we say I have a gut feeling, or I have butterflies in my stomach, that's a very real experience of the connection between the brain and the gut. There are actually more connections from the gut to the brain than the other way around. And there's this beautiful wandering nerve, the vagus nerve, which starts at the base of our skull here and goes all the way down to the colon, and it basically connects to our lungs, our heart, our liver, and all of the digestive organs. And this is where we kind of open the door to the conversation around stress and how stress impacts our gut. So we're going to come back to this again more later too, but I just wanted to plant a few seeds and kind of give you do a little bit of an overview of what we need to talk about. So that's the gut. We have these incredible array of these microbes. They're talking to each other all the time. They're talking to us. There's this huge conversation that's going on. We're trying to figure out how do we balance this conversation so that we have good health, we feel well, we digest our food, we get the nutrients that we need, passing through that barrier junction in the way that is appropriate for our body. We don't have inflammation, all the rest of it, okay? So that's kind of the larger perspective. Now, we are talking about today some of the more chronic and more concerning conditions that we have in our world: obesity, type 2 diabetes, and metabolic syndrome. So there are these drugs that I've mentioned in the emails that I was sending out that have more recently come out in the last couple of years that are being used to treat obesity, type 2 diabetes, and metabolic syndrome. And they're doing that by working with a particular thing called GLP-1, which is something that we naturally secrete in our gut every time we eat. So we're going to, again, focus on how is it that we can, do this without working with the gut, with the drugs. But first, we kind of need to understand what's going on with the obesity epidemic, the type 2 diabetes epidemic, and metabolic syndrome. And this is where I'd love for you to just kind of listen in and see like if any of this describes you, because it's something that we want to be thinking about for our own health. So when we think about obesity and resulting considerations, um, obesity can link to, cardiovascular disease, type 2 diabetes, musculoskeletal disorders, and cancers, especially of the endometrial, breast, and colon. Type 2 diabetes, it's estimated that 1 in 11 people worldwide have diabetes. This is going to more than double by 2050. This means there could be as many as 1.3 billion people with type 2 diabetes by 2050. That is insane. That is really, really inconceivable. It's inconceivable. It's going to be an inconceivable cost for healthcare, and of course, an inconceivable cost for personal well-being. So we got to turn stuff around, right? We need to shift this as much as possible. So yeah, so about 1 in 11 people worldwide right now have type 2 diabetes, but this is going to double by 2050. So about 1.3 billion people by 2050. And then we have this thing called metabolic syndrome. If you want to just do a show of hands, if you've heard of metabolic syndrome. Anyone heard of metabolic syndrome? Okay. So I'm actually going to drop in the chat here sort of what determines metabolic syndrome. So metabolic syndrome is a combination of high blood pressure, high blood sugar, which is a fasting glucose over 100, high cholesterol, triglycerides, and then low HDL, which is a good cholesterol. So basically, inappropriate kind of cholesterol numbers. And then increased waist circumference. So we're talking about the visceral adipose tissue, so the buildup of fat around the belly. Just so those of you who came in, there was something going on with the registration. So some of you are named Ellen Kittredge. So if you want to change your name, feel free to do that. I'm not sure if you're seeing that, but you can just click on the name Ellen Kittredge and then just type in your name. And that way I'll know who you are if you have a question. I will hold questions till the end. Feel free to type them into the chat box, but we'll do live questions at the end. So 40% of Americans have 3 out of 5 of these different aspects of the metabolic syndrome, which means that they have metabolic syndrome. So metabolic syndrome is basically a precursor to the more serious issues of diabetes, obesity, and then all the resulting things from that, like cardiovascular disease and the cancers and all the rest of it. So if you're starting to see that you have some of these things, so maybe you've been putting on a little bit of extra weight, maybe you've noticed that your triglycerides are bumping up, or your cholesterol is bumping up, maybe suddenly you've got high blood pressure out of nowhere. This is when you want to start paying attention and really think about how can we reverse this, because we can reverse metabolic syndrome, we can reverse diabetes type 2, we can reverse obesity, it all can be reversed, but the longer we continue on this pathway, the harder it is to kind of reverse it. So we want to think about what we can do, on the sooner side. So this brings me to the next topic I wanted to talk about, which is how to eat for a healthy midsection. So here's where we talk about first the weight loss drugs. So there are many on the market. The most popular that you might recognize or may have heard of is Ozempic, also called semaglutide, Wegovy, Trulicity, Mounjaro, and I think there's like a whole bunch of others at this point. So these are called GLP-1 agonists. And this is something that, again, as I mentioned before, is it's very chemically similar to something that we naturally release in our body, in our gut, called GLP-1. And what this does is it increases satiety, so that sense of being full or satisfied with your meal, which then decreases the appetite and then decreases cravings. So every time we eat, our gut begins to produce GLP-1. And then at the end of every meal, it's kind of as our body, basically our blood sugar raises and our body says, okay, we have enough food. We have a high production of this for about 3 to 5 minutes. And that basically this hormone tells our body we're full, no need to eat more, and then those levels drop dramatically. So in nature, in our bodies, we have a natural, rising and decrease of this every time we eat. For the drugs that they're using now, these ones that I mentioned, what happens is you inject them once a week, and it causes you to have a high level of this GLP-1 agonist. So it's not actually GLP-1. It's very chemically similar. It causes a high level of this for a week. So basically what that means is you have appetite suppression, um, craving suppression, and a sense of satiety. So basically you don't want to eat anything. So that's a good way to lose weight. Unfortunately, there's lots of side effects. There are benefits though, and I think that, for some people, this is considering, obviously with your doctor, this is a conversation about what you need to do as far as what the health benefits might be and the side effects might be. The benefits are weight loss and the resulting health benefits of losing weight, better blood sugar regulation and the resulting benefits, and then a decrease in the visceral adipose tissue, which is the buildup of that fat around the belly, which is more unhealthy fat because it's hormonally active. So basically, once we start to build up that fat, we have hormones that are secreted in that fat, and that kind of like throws a spanner in the works for weight loss efforts, and so much else. So it is really helpful to reduce that. However, there are a lot of side effects, including ones that are unknown. So I think one of the scary things about new drugs is that we don't know exactly what's going on until a few years down the line. So these are still relatively new. So that means that unfortunately um, we might have problems, like worse problems than we're seeing right now within, 2 to 5 years. So these are just the things we want to be considering and, thinking about as we're talking to our doctors. But the side effects that are known so far as people get very sick to their stomach, nauseous, vomiting, constipation, and then actually stopping the bowel, like complete bowel obstruction, which is very, very dangerous. There's also pancreatitis, and we're showing that it seems to be that there's thyroid disease that's cropping up as well. So these are some of the many side effects. Again, there's possibly others that are discovered. So we just don't know exactly where things are going with this. However, these drugs are absolutely taking off because they are basically a guarantee of rapid weight loss. Unfortunately, you don't just lose weight, you lose protein as well, or sorry, you lose muscle as well. So basically, you lose weight quickly, but you're losing a lot of your strength at the same time. So it's not really healthy. And it's very unnatural, of course, to have such a high production of GLP-1 constantly in the body. It's not meant to be, our bodies are not meant to be like that. Um, so what are our alternatives? How can we, do the same thing? How can we lose some weight, take off some of that visceral adipose tissue, start to reverse our blood sugar, try to bring it down and get ourselves out of that danger range for type 2 diabetes. These are really important things to consider. These are not, you know, not non-serious conditions. So, there are many foods that support natural GLP-1 secretion. So there's certain foods that we can eat that basically boost that and give us more of that GLP-1 secretion. There are also ways we can boost certain species in our gut microbiome to support more GLP-1 secretion. There's been an amazing amount of study about this, some very specific, very hard facts and data on this. And I'll discuss more about both of these areas below. I just want to plant a few seeds though first and tell you that there's another hormone we need to discuss, which is called leptin. And leptin resistance is related to fat loss. And this can develop because of high inflammation, high triglycerides, and high insulin. So basically, think about, again, metabolic syndrome. So we start to get metabolic syndrome. We're on the road to type 2 diabetes and obesity. And if we have leptin resistance, what happens is we don't stop eating. So when we have leptin resistance, we are missing that chemical signaling that is telling us um, to stop eating. So leptin and ghrelin are these two important hormones that have to do with our satiety and our hunger signals. And of course, that relate to, to fat loss and to weight in general. So, two things to think about just to kind of begin to ponder, and then I'm going to move into some other territory and we'll come back to the food piece. But things that block weight loss because they block leptin, so things that causes leptin resistance. There are two main foods, refined sugar and flour. So if there's one thing you can do today is you can just consider stopping refined sugar and consider stopping flours. Just these two dietary changes can make a huge difference in your health and especially in shifting weight patterns. So just simply staying away from refined sugar and then anything that's a flour. So that you can eat whole grains, that's totally fine. But if it's been pulverized and made into a flour, you just say, no, I don't eat that. Okay. And what this does is it significantly shifts our conversation with leptin, and we're able to have that appropriate signaling so we can stop eating. And that's a really, really important part of the paradigm. Does anyone here, you don't have to raise your hand if you don't want to, but does anyone here feel like they don't have the appropriate signaling for hunger and satiety? Like you can just keep eating and eating and eating without really getting that, without getting that appropriate satiety. Yeah. Okay. A little bit of that. Yeah. So anyway, so maybe think about this as a possibility. Okay, so those are two things you can shift out of the diet. Two things you can do right off the bat to start getting more GLP. Number one is eat more fiber. And I'm going to talk a lot about that in a ton of detail and specifically what fibers, but also chewing more. So just simply chewing more. Now, this is so cool because if you eat real food, i.e. fiber, you have to chew more. So they actually go together. So you can't like, scarf down a kale salad. You literally have to chew it, right? Um, like you could scarf down a cookie or something. So chewing is an amazing way to have more GLP-1 secretion. And in some ways, we can think about the only thing that we actually have control of in our digestive system is chewing and swallowing. Everything else is happening without our sort of conscious intent. It's just happening automatically by the body's processes. So what can we control? We can control how much we chew, and we can chew a little bit more. And it's amazing how much that can shift everything. So just consider if any of those things I've mentioned are things that you feel like, yeah, I could probably do that actually. That's pretty easy. I think I could adopt that. Um, okay. So now we're going to go back to talking a little bit about the leaky gut. And then we're going to talk again about other foods that help secrete GLP-1 and the ways we can work with our gut microbiome. So I mentioned before that we looked at that slide of leaky gut, and why is that important to think about that? Because leaky gut or gut dysbiosis, which is a dysregulated gut, can disrupt the natural secretion of GLP-1. So if we have a leaky gut, we're automatically probably not producing as much of the GLP-1. So this is one of the things we need to repair and correct if we want to be able to have this appropriate signaling of satiety and increase our GLP-1 and therefore decrease, our visceral adipose tissue and change all these other markers that we're talking about. So a few ways we do this: we regulate sleep, we reduce our stress, and we support the microbiome. So one of my teachers says, crap food, toxins, and stress. Those are the three main things we need to worry about in today's day and age. And I would add to that poor sleep. So toxins for the gut are glyphosate, NSAIDs, which is non-steroidal anti-inflammatory drugs, so things like Tylenol or paracetamol or aspirin. These are very specifically damaging to the gut lining. Excess refined sugar, drugs, alcohol in excess, and especially if you already have a weak leaky gut, then adding alcohol in is going to be more problematic. So those are some of the toxins we need to think about. Stress increases our cortisol levels, and this causes a loosening of those tight junctions, which can lead to leaky gut. And it activates so then we have a leaky gut, we have a release of something called IL-6, which is inflammatory, that activates the hypothalamus pituitary adrenal axis, HPA axis in the brain. And that tells the brain, hey, let's make more cortisol. So then we have more cortisol secretion and then more loosening of the tight junctions. Okay, so stress is really, unfortunately, a direct problem. So it's really important to think about ways that we can start to address any stress that we have in our lives. And what was the other thing? Sleep. So sleep is also something that can change our gut. So within like 24 hours of getting really poor sleep, we can start to have challenges with our gut microbiome as well. So these are things that we want to be thinking about. And obviously crap food. So crap food would be refined sugar and non-organic foods and basically anything that's not a real food. So we want to think about as much as possible getting those out of our diet. I also just want to speak to the fact that women can have a little extra difficulty with fat loss. And that's because there's additional challenges, hormonal challenges that women have, generally speaking, a little bit more. But one of those reasons is that there's a lot of estrogenic chemicals in our environment. So we have these estrogen mimickers that basically, increase the amount of estrogen in the body, which causes hormonal balances, which then lead to a whole bunch of other problems with detoxification. So that's basically, it just ends up being additional toxicity, which then can cause problems with our gut microbiome and cause problems with our ability to detoxify. And then we know, I think, that it's fairly well understood now that because fat tissue is less metabolically active, when we have toxins, our body says, hey, let's store those toxins in the fat because it's the safest place to store the toxins. Otherwise, those toxins are going to harm the body. So if you have a lot of toxins and you have more toxins coming in and you're not able to detoxify because you have challenges with your gut microbiome or your detoxification pathways, then unfortunately you're just going to put more weight on because the body's trying to actually preserve your life. So the body's always making very intelligent, strategic decisions to try to figure out like the best way to deal with, whatever's going on. So um, I just wanted to share that piece as well to say, I understand it can be difficult. These is not necessarily like it's not necessarily like a one-step process. There are these, different hormonal issues that can be a little bit challenging. The full list of hormones that are at play is leptin, which I mentioned before, cortisol, which is a stress hormone, insulin, which has to do with blood sugar regulation, estrogen, which is again more problematic for women generally speaking, ghrelin, which also has to do with hunger signaling, and then the GLP-1, the glucagon like peptide 1, this thing that is secreted every time we eat. So these are all working together to regulate our weight, and the amount of fat percentage that we have in our weight, as well as our hunger, satiety, and metabolism. Okay, so what are some things that leaky gut is linked to? So how do we know if we have this thing called leaky gut, and I'll bring this slide back again so we can kind of take another look at it. But it can be linked to autoimmune disease, metabolic syndrome, which we've talked a lot about, diabetes, fat gain and obesity. So all of these things we're talking about. Heart disease, which is connected as well. Additionally to that, we have allergies and sensitivities. And I don't know if you guys have noticed this in yourself or your friends or anything, but there are so many more people that are so much more sensitive and allergic these days than ever before, especially kids. And so I think a lot of this has to do with the gut microbiome and leaky gut or dysbiosis and this hypersensitivity that has to do with that, and it has to do with the immune system. I'll talk a little bit more about that. Hashimoto's thyroiditis, which is an autoimmune thyroid condition, is also connected to leaky gut. We also have dementia connected to leaky gut. So how amazing would it be to know that you can actually reverse dementia, or you can stop the the progression towards dementia by fixing your gut. That is a hugely important piece of information, I think. And then we have cardiovascular disease and neurological diseases like things like MS. So I'm going to do a screen share again of the leaky gut slide. Okay, so here we are. We're looking at this again. Oops. So we're going to look at this a little bit closer. I'm not sure how well you can see this, but you might see these little things that these little letters that say LPS. Can you guys see that? They're kind of here on the inside of the gut, and then they're also leaking through here, and then they're getting on these little carriers here, and they're starting to go into the body. So again, we have crap food toxins and stress that have broken down the integrity of the gut lining and then cause the leakage of something called LPS. So LPS is an important thing that I'll be coming back to again several times, and it's very related to this GLP-1 and our ability again to have healthy weight loss. So LPS stands for lipopolysaccharide. It is a metabolic endotoxin. So that's just a fancy way of saying it's a toxin that we produce internally. So it's something produced by our metabolism. So our metabolism is just a process of, digestion and movement of food through the body. So in the process of digestion, of eating and digestion, there are certain bacteria that die and they give off this LPS. These bacteria are called proteobacteria, and this is a lot of words, so I don't want to give you too much, but I'm just going to drop this one in the chat here. So proteobacteria is the bacteria that produces LPS when it dies. So every time we eat, we kill off our part of our gut microbiome. So every time we eat, some microbes die. That's a normal thing, and then they quickly reproduce. So it's not that big a deal. We don't have to worry about it. However, if we have a lot of proteobacteria, when they die, they're giving out a lot of this metabolic endotoxin, this LPS. And what that's doing is it's leaking through this this tight barrier here that's been unfortunately broken through, and it's going into the rest of the body. And here is causing inflammation. So this inflammation is linked to all of those things that I just talked about. So dementia, diabetes, obesity, inflammatory conditions, autoimmune conditions, the hypersensitivity, allergenicity, all of that is linked to inflammation coming from this breakdown of the tight barrier junction in the gut. Okay, so you can see it right here. So the LPS gets on this little carrier, and then it goes here, and it triggers these inflammatory cytokines. We may know about the word cytokine just because of COVID and, the issues that we know about when people had COVID and they would end up in the hospital and they say there's a cytokine storm. There's this huge amount of inflammation in the body, and that's actually what would cause more of the damage is a cytokine storm. So it's the immune system reacting to the pathogen or to the irritant. So in this case, this LPS getting into the body is causing a cytokine storm, and that's leading to inflammation. So we need to fix this barrier junction. We need to tighten this gut lining up, right? And we need to, if possible, reduce the amount of proteobacteria, because those proteobacteria, if we have less of them to begin with, even if we have a leaky gut, we're going to have less of that leaking out. But ideally, we want to tighten up the gut function, gut barrier, when we want to reduce the proteobacteria. So this is all connected to what we're talking about. So I know this is a lot of information. Have I lost you guys? Or are you still with me? I'm trying to make sure I wanted to give you the full picture. You know me, I like to educate. So I want to make sure I give you the full picture of what's going on here. So I hope it's fascinating and interesting. Okay, so I'm just going to go back to my notes again. Okay, so now that we know what LPS is, and endotoxemia, we talked about how it gets on this boat and starts to release these pro-inflammatory cytokines. They get revved up, they travel through the body, they get into the bloodstream, they got all this inflammation, and we get our immune system activated, and then we have all sorts of these crazy hypersensitivities. We eat food, we feel worse after we eat food because we're eating food, killing off the protobacteria, it's reducing that LPS, leaking into the rest of the body, and we're like, oh, I just feel so inflamed, I feel so tired, I've got brain fog. All of that is directly related to this process that I just showed you about. Um, so this is a really important part of the conversation. Um, and about 33% of the Western population has metabolic endotoxemia. It's probably higher than that, but that's the most recent estimate. So that's like 1 in 3 people basically have this process going on every single time they eat. Um, so, gut microbiome to the rescue. We're going to figure this out. We're going to turn this around. So, what we eat matters. So I want to first talk about a diet to address the release of the lipopolysaccharides. So um, the type of fat we eat is really important. So when we eat fat, what happens is it can pull more of this LPS into circulation. So some fats have a higher endotoxemic response, basically, and some fats have a lower endotoxemic response. So some fats, when we eat them, we feel better, they actually reduce the inflammation, and some fats, they increase the inflammation. And some fats have basically a neutral effect. So if we have this problem, we do need to be careful with saturated fat, and that does include coconut oil because it brings more lipopolysaccharide into circulation. So even though there might be other health benefits to coconut oil, if we've got this going on, unfortunately, we're just continuing the circulation of the LPS. Olive oil has a neutral effect. So olive oil is totally fine to have. Avocado oil and omega-3 fatty acids, things like fish oil, all of that's going to have a positive effect. So that's going to help, that's going to be anti-inflammatory and help us to reduce this metabolic endotoxemia, so less LPS in circulation. The other thing we want to think about is that meals that are generally higher in fat and higher in calories, so just like a really heavy calorie meal, these can also impact and cause more of this release of these pro-inflammatory cytokines. So that's another problem. Um, so how is LPS connected to metabolic conditions and what we're talking about here, which is how do we eat to try to, reduce our midsection and get back to a healthy midsection. So metabolic endotoxemia, unfortunately, initiates obesity and insulin resistance. So this is directly related again to what we're talking about. LPS also reduces mitochondrial health, which is mitochondria like the powerhouses in our cells that give us energy. It also lowers diversity in our microbiome. And one of the key things that we can do is increase diversity. It lowers our keystone species. We'll get back to that. And so how do we manage this? There's a lot of different things there's a lot of ways to do this. It's not too difficult. I do this a lot with my clients. There's some wonderful probiotics that you can take that can really quickly reduce this LPS, and there's some other stuff we can take that can help to support that gut lining and that integrity and get us back to a healthy gut again. So that's something that I do a lot, and based on, looking at lab results, looking at a gut biome test, seeing what's going on with someone, I'll be recommending that specifically. But to get started right now, you can reduce your saturated fat, you can modulate your gut microbiome, which is going to be the next kind of thing we're talking about, and improve diversity of the gut microbiome. And all of this is going to help to manage this endotoxemia. Okay, so you guys with me? All right, so now I'm going to talk about the sort of the main microbes that hang out in our gut. So I mentioned earlier there were like, a whole bunch of microbes in there doing their thing. Hopefully we're all we're all hanging out and having a good time together. But sometimes we have some inflammation and some problems starting, right? So what are the healthy probiotics that we can be taking in or increasing in our innate microbiome? So there's 3 general categories. We have the lactobacillus and the bifidobacterium, and these are oftentimes things that we supplement with. We can also eat foods that are high in lactobacillus. These are fermented foods. or foods that encourage growth of the bifidobacterium species, and more about that below. I'll talk more about that below. There's also something called Saccharomyces boulardii, which is a healthy fungus or yeast, and we can also supplement with this. And I'm oftentimes recommending this, specific, probiotic or healthy yeast for people, especially who've had food poisoning or who've had something that's really caused some dysregulation in their gut, because it very quickly can help to re-regulate the gut microbiome. And the third thing is these bacillus spore forming spores. And this is a brand called Megaspore. So I'm just going to do another quick screen share here. Okay. So this is a spore biotic. It's different than the other types of probiotics in the market. This is a newer kind of thing to be available. I mean, it's been available now for, I think, upwards of 10 years. These kinds of probiotics have been on the market, but they're still not necessarily as known as some of the other probiotics out there. So Microbiome Labs is the company that I work with for the gut microbiome testing. I do also recommend a lot of their supplements, but I'll recommend other supplements too, depending on what's needed for the individual. But this is I just wanted to show you, this is what we're going to talk about next, is this particular product called Megaspore Biotic, and the way that these spore forming probiotics actually help to reset the gut microbiome. This is really, really fascinating information. And this is where a lot of the healing really comes in. So spore-based probiotics, they're basically our oldest friends. They're historically what we've been in contact with. These are not innate to our gut microbiome. They're not probiotics that we're born with, that we receive, on that first inoculation when we're born. They are what we find in nature. So the spore-based probiotics would be breathing in when we're outside, running around, swimming in the water, climbing trees, playing in the dirt, rolling in the moss. All of that allows us to breathe in and take in these spore-based probiotics. So these are, again, their oldest friends. Our gut microbiome has evolved over millennia with spores to create a very healthy and happy ecosystem. Unfortunately, because we're now spending so much time inside and, away from the outside, we have to sort of think about taking these in a supplemental form. So that's what that supplement is. It's a way of recreating what's happening in nature. These spore-based probiotics are very intelligent. They survive the low acidity in the stomach, so they don't actually get killed off by the stomach acid, which basically all of the probiotics get killed off by the stomach acid. Once they're in the gut, they start to do cell signaling to help to repair at many levels, and they support the regrowth of keystone species. So keystone species is another thing I want to talk about. Keystone species are, if you think about the keystone of an arch, right? It's that thing that provides that incredible structure and support. If you remove the keystone, what happens? The whole arch falls down, right? You can't have an arch without that keystone. So there are certain keystone species, not too many of them. There's just a handful of keystone species that if we don't have them in our gut, then we're going to have the structural integrity of the ecosystem is going to start to collapse, and that's where we get really sick. So these spores first started being used as supplements in Europe in 1958. So they've been around for a while as far as understanding them and discovering them and working with them. However, it's still fairly recent that they've been on the market in the form that they are. Spores can remain dormant for centuries, and they open when they're in the gut. So they actually know exactly when to open and start to do this cell signaling and basically instruct and tell the gut microbiome, the other probiotics in there, exactly what to do. So they can secrete different antibiotic substances if necessary. So if there's too much, E. coli or any other sort of pathogen in there, any other, organism that's grown to too high of a level, the spores will basically secrete antibiotic substances and just kill off that particular pathogen. So incredibly intelligent, very targeted approach. So they go in there and they're like, hey, okay, we've got too much Bilophila, we've got too much Sotorella, we've got too much E. coli. We're going to take this down and then get a happier, healthier gut microbiome. So 24 different antibiotic substances that are secreted that can do this. They produce antioxidants. They can be used during immune treatment. They help to decrease triglycerides and about a 40% decrease after 12 weeks of taking Megaspore, shown of a decrease in triglycerides. They can protect the liver from inflammation and damage. They can increase some of the short chain fatty acids, which is something I guess I'll talk about as more. They increase the keystone species. This is super, super important. So because of what they're doing to kill off these organisms that are more pathogenic, they help to create more space for some of the keystone species that may have been killed off. So when we have taken antibiotics or had other things that have assaulted our gut microbiome, we may have killed off most of one of the species of keystone species. So maybe we have a few in there kind of hanging out, just kind of like hanging on for dear life. The spores come in there, they take away some of the competition, and then we eat the right foods. We feed these keystone species, and then they start to regrow. And this is the way towards good health. So this is a very, very different thing than just taking a probiotic, which the other ones like the bifido and the lactobacillus, those ones come into the gut and they go through and they confer some benefit for the period of time that they're there, but they don't change the nature of the gut microbiome. The spores actually come in and they do this huge cleanup effort, and then they encourage the regrowth, and they just, make a very much happier situation in there. The other thing the spores can do is they can decrease endotoxins by 42% in 30 days. So again, this metabolic endotoxemia, the LPS, there's a particular one called HU58, which I recommend a lot for people at the beginning, because that very quickly takes down the LPS. And if we do that in conjunction with things that are repairing the integrity of the gut lining, then we've got an amazing situation. Then all we have to do on top of that is just think about what specific foods we want to be eating to support, the specific ones that we're trying to regrow. So there's just a quick study I wanted to share about this. There were 75 healthy college-age men and women, and they did, I think it was a 30-day study. I'm not sure actually if this was, I think it was, I'm pretty sure it was a 30-day study. And they fed them a cheese pizza meal. So they'd half of them, and half of them were taking Megaspore, and the other half were not taking Megaspore, were taking a placebo. In the 30 days, they had a 42% reduction in serum endotoxin levels. So this is what I just mentioned. In the placebo group, there was a 36% increase in endotoxin. So they were eating these cheese pizzas, and their metabolic endotoxin was going up by 36%. In the Megaspore group, they were eating the cheese pizza and went down by 42%. So there's like a 70% difference in 1 month. So basically, if you don't take the probiotic and you eat, crappy food, you're going to have a huge increase in this metabolic endotoxemia. If you take the spore and eat crappy food, you're actually going to have a reduction in it, which is amazing. So very, very protective, even if we're not eating well. Not that I'm recommending not eating well, but just to know that it's helpful to know that. It normally would take about 60 weeks to see these sorts of inflammatory markers go down. So this is a super, super quick reduction. The other thing that's amazing about Megaspore or the spore-based probiotics, and that's not the only one on the market. There's plenty on the market at this point, but that was the first one. They increase another probiotic called Akkermansia. So this is a key player. So I'm going to do another screen share and show you. I'm also going to drop this one in the chat. So yes, Jody, HU58. Just a quick show of hands. Has anyone heard Akkermansia? Has anyone heard of this particular probiotic? Yeah. And if you've heard of it, if you want to just pop into the chat, maybe anything you know about it, if you want to. You don't have to if you don't want to. just be curious what people have heard about. There's been a bit of a rage around it, which is for a very good reason. Okay, so I just want to kind of see what we're looking at here. So I mentioned this proteobacteria, which is the LPS, right? This is what we're looking at. This is a healthy reference range here. And this person has a lot of this proteobacteria. So their ratio is way, way high. So this is the kind of thing I see on the gut microbiome reports is what's going on with this dysbiosis ratio. So is it in range? Does it look healthy? Does it look, relatively where it's supposed to be? Or do we have a huge amount of something that's going to be causing a lot of problems? So this particular person is having a lot of inflammation and has a lot of different health challenges that are all inflammatory in nature. And we can see looking at this that a lot of it is linked to the gut. So just going back to that. So now I'm going to take a quick look at these. This is our list of keystone species. So these are the main species that are considered to be most important. So this person here is missing a lot of these keystone species. Again, doesn't mean that they don't have, a small amount of them, but it's at a low enough level that it's not detected on the sample. The main one that we're talking about is this one here, Akkermansia muciniphila. So this unfortunately is not detected for this particular person. So we'll go back and talk about the Akkermansia now, because this is a super key important piece of the whole conversation about GLP-1. But I just kind of wanted to give you a sense of what we're looking at. Oh, the other thing I wanted to point out on here is we've got these bifido species at the top, bifidobacterium species. These are other ones that are very important for the conversation around GLP-1. So that's something else we'll talk about that can be increased. Okay, so going back to my notes. So Akkermansia is a keystone species, and its foundation is very wide-reaching. Akkermansia lives in and around the mucosal layer in the gut. So that very thin, remember that blue layer that I talked about at the beginning? That mucosal, that's where it lives. And what it does is it regulates it. So it actually eats it. So as it eats it, then the body produces more and it keeps it regulated. So it's kind of like a cleaning mechanism for the mucosal layer. So if there's too little Akkermansia, the mucosal layer isn't cleansed and regulated. If there's too much Akkermansia, which is possible, so you can have too high of it as well, then that can also cause more of a problem. So we really need the perfect amount to help with this barrier function. So Akkermansia helps us to get that correct barrier function back. And it can improve insulin sensitivity. It can help with anxiety and IBS. It can decrease cholesterol and body weight. And it can decrease hip circumference. And this is studies where people took Akkermansia as a probiotic directly for 90 days and saw this, significant reduction in these things. So how do we get a happy Akkermansia-rich gut? So we can take it as a probiotic. There is now a probiotic, a couple different probiotics that have Akkermansia in them, which you can take, and then you can get the benefit that way. You can also take the spore-based probiotics and you can encourage the regrowth of your own Akkermansia by doing that. So if you were to do a gut microbiome test and see that, okay, you don't have any Akkermansia, you could take some, which would be a supplement that you'd have to keep taking because it's not going to actually grow from the supplement that you're taking of Akkermansia, but it's going to help to confer benefits as it goes through. Or you could take the spores and you could encourage the regrowth of your own Akkermansia. You can also make sure that you eat what the Akkermansia likes. So this is a very, very important part of again, of the weight loss and the insulin resistance piece. So if we have adequate levels of Akkermansia, then we can correct some of these things that we're talking about. So this is a very important part of this conversation. So the main food that Akkermansia likes is cranberries. So what I recommend to my clients who don't have any Akkermansia that's showing up in their gut is to get some cranberry polyphenol. So you can get like just like a blend of, of just simply like a powdered, cranberry that you can take in a smoothie every day. You can get dried cranberries, but just make sure they're not sweetened with sugar. You can get dried cranberries that are sweetened with like blueberry juice or apple juice. That's what I eat, generally speaking. Um, and you can also increase your fish oil, flaxseed oil, and olives, because healthy fats are really important for the mucosa in the gut lining. And Akkermansia also likes onions, garlics, leeks, artichoke, yams, agave, bananas, and then some of the foods in the brassica family or the cruciferous family, so Brussels sprouts, cauliflower, broccoli. It can also benefit from chicory root, something called yacon root, Y-A-C-O-N, asparagus, okra, and burdock root. So there's a lot of different things. But the main thing that I recommend for people who don't have akkermansia is cranberry polyphenols, because that's been probably the most studied thing that it really likes. Also, any red berries. So you can get sort of powdered, supplements that are just like cranberries and pomegranate and red berries. And you can be taking that in on a regular basis, and that's a nice way to get it in as well, or just eat more red berries. So these are very rich in polyphenols. So again, akkermansia strengthens the gut lining, improves digestive health, and helps support a healthy weight. This has been incredibly studied, and it's because it has all of these different benefits that it confers because of what it does for leaky gut as well. So again, 3 ways you can do this. You can take supplemental akkermansia. You can take spores, which help to regrow the akkermansia in your gut, and you can make sure you feed akkermansia. So if you want to move forward from this conversation today and consider those options, I would say probably the best thing to do is to think about regrowing your own akkermansia. But if you want to also get some benefit by taking an akkermansia akkermansia probiotic at the same time, you could do that. But I would say also work to support it, from the ground up, so you can regrow your own akkermansia. You don't have to rely on a probiotic for the rest of your life. So that's something that I wanted to just speak to there. Okay, so we've got a couple other things I want to talk about. I want to talk about now specific foods to enhance the production of GLP-1. And I also want to talk about supplements that can enhance the production of GLP-1. So we've talked about some of the gut microbiome pieces, the importance of akkermansia, also bifido species are important, and lactobacillus, which I mentioned as well. So basically all the different probiotics can be helpful. But I want to show you 2 more slides that will give you a sense of some of what we're looking at as far as foods that help to support. So there are specific foods that will actually feed all of these keystone species. So if you do some gut testing, you can see which foods do you want to focus on that are going to feed your Parabacteroides meridie or your Clostridium scindens or your Oxalobacter formigens, whatever it is that is low. This is a slide of a client who is later in life, in the late 70s, early 80s, and came to me. So about 14 months ago, their diversity in their gut microbiome, so the number of species in the gut microbiome, I think was 181. So that was 14 months ago. This client has been taking the Megaspore probiotic and doing a lot of other things to support healing leaky gut, taking fish oil and all sorts of things. And the diversity has increased to 289. So that is a massive increase. So what this means is that this particular person's innate diversity, innate microbiome, there were 108 species that were not detectable 14 months ago. And now these are at detectable levels and they have come back. So this is amazing. So we can regrow our own innate gut microbiome, and this is where we really confer health benefits for the long term. So this is phenomenal to see this. This is the highest that I've seen usually I see the increase to be about between 40 to like 75 species. So this was quite impressive to see this number of species increase from between the tests. So this particular individual also eats a very diverse array of food. And so one of the best things we can do to support diversity in the gut microbiome, which confers all these benefits and, supports our health, is to diversify our diet and specifically to focus on some of the functional fibers, which are those fibers that, feed some of these keystone species that I was talking about. I'll show you one other slide. And I've been talking too much about this, but this is another really important piece of the puzzle. These guys right here, butyrate, propionate, acetate, and lactate, these are what are called short-chain fatty acids, SCFAs. This is basically the way I think of this is we eat foods that the gut likes. So say I have some asparagus and a cup of chicory root tea, and some potatoes that have been cooked and cooled. And I eat those and my they go through my digestion and end up in the gut, and the bacteria in there go, oh my gosh, thank you so much, Ellen, this is so delicious. I'm going to take this cooked and cooled potato, this resistant starch in this potato, and I'm going to chomp it up and I'm going to give you some butyrate. And the butyrate that this probiotic is producing and giving to me is going to help to protect the mucosal barrier, the integrity of the gut lining. Butyrate is probably the most important of the short chain fatty acids that's produced. And so when I see somebody who has a leaky gut, I'm always talking about, okay, how can we bump up the butyrate? So again, which specific foods can we eat that are going to support the butyrate production? So if we eat what our gut microbiome likes, then we get nice gifts back from them, which help to balance everything that we need in our gut. So this is how we keep that healthy balance, is giving them what they like so that they produce enough of these short chain fatty acids. So when I'm looking again at someone's test, I'm seeing, okay, are they producing enough of this particular one? Are they producing too much of this other one? What does that mean about the microbial diversity, and how can we address that? So again, so this is a conversation again around diversity and foods that we can eat to support our gut. So now, foods that enhance GLP-1. So these are GLP-1 boosting foods. These are foods, if we eat them, that we actually have more GLP-1 production in the gut every time that we eat. So olive oil, pistachios, avocados, nuts and seeds, any unsaturated long-chain fatty acids, so that's basically what we find in nuts and seeds, helps to stimulate the release of GLP-1 from the gut. Eggs and plain yogurt are also sources, ways that we can stimulate GLP-1 production. And generally eating higher amounts of protein can help to stimulate more of this GLP-1. We can also get it from flavonoids. These are specific plant chemicals or plant compounds. So there's one, pretty well-known one, which is turmeric or curcumin, is very, very helpful for GLP-1 production. Everyone kind of knows of curcumin as being anti-inflammatory, so it's helping in many different aspects as well. Cinnamon is another one, and we know that cinnamon is something that's great for people who are diabetic or pre-diabetic. Take cinnamon, it helps to regulate the blood sugar, and it specifically also helps to stimulate more of this GLP-1. Rosemary is another one, so you can just pile a bunch of rosemary in when you're cooking. And then green tea, e.g. ECGC, is a wonderful form. So, and I think, again, green tea is something that we know, like, oh yeah, green tea for weight loss, right? This is why. This is part of the conversation, is because it's stimulating this GLP-1. The other thing is butyrate, which I just spoke about and just talked about, makes GLP-1. So if we can eat the foods that help our gut to produce more butyrate, then we can have more GLP-1 production. These are resistant starches. So I'm going to actually pop this list here. This is not totally comprehensive, but this is a good beginning, at least, to the conversation. So these are resistant starches that if we eat these, our gut will produce butyrate, and the butyrate will increase production of GLP-1, and it'll also do so much to protect the integrity of our gut. So we've got our beans, starchy foods that have been cooked and cooled. So this is a really important thing. So if you make your potatoes and you then you make some roast potatoes or something, maybe you have a few at dinner and then you have leftovers, you have them the next day, don't heat them up. It's fine if they're room temperature, but don't heat them all the way through. If you heat them all the way back through, they're gonna be regular starch. If they're cool, then they're gonna be resistant starch. If you do forget and you heat them up again, if you cool them back down again, they create even more resistant starch. So every time you cook and then cool potatoes, rice, sweet potatoes, pasta, corn tortillas, any of that, it'll create more resistant starch. So this is a really, really wonderful food for the gut microbiome. You can also get like potato starch and cook with it as well. So you might see that in like gluten-free, breads and things like that. There'll be potato starch, and that's going to be a source of resistant starch as well. So those are some of the sources of resistant starch. We also have fiber, and I mentioned that at the beginning. If you just add more fiber and chew more, you're going to have more GLP-1 secretion. Fiber is obviously found in all whole foods, fruits and vegetables. But in addition to helping to feed our good bacteria and helping helping them with the secretion of all these lovely things that are so good for us and helpful for our gut, fiber also increases the bulk in our small intestine, and this sends a message to the brain that we're full. So fiber directly supports satiety in that way. And any whole starches, so roots, tubers, legumes, as long as you're not eating the processed flour version, then all of these can support healthy weight loss. But specifically for some of the higher starch foods, again, like rice and potatoes, think about doing those cooked and then cooled, and then you're going to get that resistant starch, and it's a completely different animal in the gut. Generally speaking, for type 2 diabetes, people who have type 2 diabetes, generally speaking, don't have enough butyrate producers. So they don't have enough of those good guys in the gut microbiome that are producing butyrate. So again, going back to that keystone species, we could look at and we could say, which ones of these produce butyrate? Okay, what do they like to eat? Let me make sure I give them what they like to eat. Inulin is another way to support butyrate production. So we've got resistant starches and we've got inulin. This is another, what we call functional fiber. And I will drop this in the chat as well. So some of the things that we can eat that are sources of inulin: leeks, asparagus, onions, wheat, garlic, chicory, oats, soybeans, and Jerusalem artichokes. And tocino is a sort of a coffee replacement that's made out of chicory root. Bifidobacteria and lactobacillus strains also help to stimulate the butyrate producers. So if we're doing things to feed those as well, then that's really good. The other thing that's sort of important in the conversation on a slightly different topic, but moves us into the supplements, which is the final piece of what I wanted to share today. Vitamin D is essential for healing tight junctions. So we do need to make sure we have enough vitamin D if we have, a concern that we have this issue going on. Okay, so what are some supplements that can help to increase GLP-1 production? Psyllium, partly because it's a source of soluble fiber, and we know that fiber helps to regulate appetite. Berberine is something that probably people maybe have heard of. It's becoming more popular these days as well. It's a plant-based compound, and it helps to lower blood sugar. It can improve heart health, reduce inflammation, aid in weight loss. Has an antimicrobial effect, and it improves gut health. So this is an amazing supplement that's oftentimes used to support people if they need support in all of these areas. We also have yerba mate, And we have curcumin, which I mentioned before, so you can use that as a spice in your food, and you can also take it as a supplement. Ginseng is also something that can increase GLP-1. And then there's something called wild bitter gourd, and bitter gourd is something that's oftentimes used for diabetes and for weight loss. And again, because it's producing this, helping to increase GLP-1 secretion. So these are all of the ways that I know at this point that we can avoid those weight loss drugs if we are a little bit worried about them, that might not be as safe as we might hope, or we might have some side effects that we really can't deal with, but we really want to try to get healthier, lose some weight, reverse, bring down the cholesterol, bring down our insulin sensitivity, get back in the right place with our blood sugar. So hopefully some of these ideas are helpful and you've been able to take away some things that you might be able to get some benefit from. So yeah, I hope this has been helpful. It's been fun to talk with you all. As far as next steps, if you do want to do some gut microbiome testing, I'll just drop that information in the chat here. There's a link that is connected to my microbiome labs account. Actually, did it? Yeah, it did. So if you click on that link, then it'll take you directly to a place where you can register as a patient. And you have to go through in that way because you have to be connected to somebody's account to be able to do the gut microbiome test. And then also, for me to be able to meet with clinicians and to be able to look at it and all the rest of it. So um, if for any reason you have any problem getting the test, then, sorry, registering for this, then, and if it asks you for a code, then you can just type in biome. Sometimes it seems like you need to do that. So I am available to do the gut microbiome testing. And what I want to say though is the way I do this is, I meet with you for an initial consultation, and then we go through and do a full health history. So I get a clear idea of exactly what's going on. And then, after we meet, then you can do the test, or you can actually order the test first if that's fine. But just to know that it comes with a initial consultation, and then there's also going to be a follow-up consultation after the results come in and go through everything. And then usually there's a couple more follow-up consultations after that as well, because I'm sort of giving you all the information, helping you with what food you need to be doing, getting you on the right supplements. And then we need to check in, because even though we know that these supplements are effective, we know that the foods will be helpful, each of us is different, each of us is bio-individual. And so we only know if we can't just say, hey, everybody take this and you're going to be fine, and again, all your problems are going to be solved. Like I said at the beginning, we have to try different things and see what works. But I love doing this work because I'm seeing such really incredible good results with folks, very quick turnarounds for a lot of people. And then sometimes it's a little more complex and it takes a little bit more time, and there's a little more discernment to do, and that's also part and parcel of it. Sometimes if you've been sick for a while, you've had leaky gut for a long, long time, it doesn't reverse overnight. It takes time. But there are ways to shift this, and there are ways to get metabolically healthy again. And there's a lot of science and a lot of data behind the supplements and behind, everything that I shared with you today. So I hope you can feel confident that it may not be as easy as injecting a drug once a week, but that drug has side effects. And those may not be, possible for you to manage. And yeah, so there are ways to do this in a healthy way. So let's see if we can, even though it's been predicted that we're going to double the amounts of diabetes and, by 2050, let's see if we can maybe bring that bit down, each of us doing our part, making some healthy choices and healthy changes. So, yeah, so if you'd like to move forward and do anything, work with me, then, you can send me an email. For some reason that didn't copy correctly. Let me try that again. Ellen_Kittredge@yahoo.com. I think probably most of you have my email address, but and then we would, for some reason that's not working. Sorry, just type it in. Oh, sorry, I put that in directly. Let me try that again. Anyway, I think you guys all have my email address, but that's what okay. Don't click on that because it's not going to work. Ellen_Kittredge@yahoo.com. Okay, so I think I would like to open it up for questions now. I think there's a few questions in the chat, but please feel free to just pop your mic open and ask me any questions that you might have. I would love to take live questions first, and then I can maybe check in the chat.
Ellen, Gail Morton.
Hi, Gail.
I, as you know, don't do wheat gluten, but early on you mentioned flours are like quinoa and teff and almond flour and all. Are they included in don't eat flour?
Yes, I mean, yes, it would be all flours. It basically anything that's processed. Is what you're so that would include like pasta or other things that are processed. So just, and if you can't do that 100%, that's okay, but just know that that is one way that we can really shift that leptin signaling. Um, but I would say that it is a good idea to think about, can I avoid all flour for a month? Just do whole grain, whole versions. So just do, whole quinoa and just do whole almonds or whatever, and then just see what you notice. See if you notice a shift. I would just do it as a test for a month. A month isn't too long to say I'm just going to not do any refined sugar. I'm not going to do any, basically any processed food, anything that the whole grain has been broken down or the whole thing has been broken down.
Thank you.
This is sort of a silly question, but it's important to me because I love beans. So you were saying that the resistant starches like potatoes and more of the white things, cooled would be a healthier way. What about beans? Beans are okay warm?
Or Well, they actually do form resistant starch as well. So beans are great to have also cooked and cooled. So you can have them warm, that's fine. There's still going to be lots of really good health benefits to beans. They're amazing source of like different B vitamins and a lot of fiber and all sorts of good stuff. But if you want to have leftovers, then have them, room temperature or something, then that's a good way good thing to think about. So it's just something to incorporate. It doesn't mean you should only eat these foods cool. I mean, warm food is important. Like if we have too many cold foods, it's not actually good for the digestion. So it's not, I'm not saying to eat, just cold food out of the fridge or something like that. And it can be like room temperature. Sometimes what I do is I'll just say I'll make a stir fry and then have rice that I made the night before, so it's been cooked and cooled, and I'll just put the stir fry on top of the rice. I won't heat the rice up. So I'm not, it's still going to be heated up a little bit when I stir in the stir fry, but there's still going to be a lot of resistant starch there.
So that could also be like if I made a soup, I could put everything in the soup and leave the beans out, cooked and refrigerated, and then drop them in the soup. Similar sort of way to help uh, improve that.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, I mean, basically, it's just if you're heating it all the way through again, then you're going to lose that resistant starch.
Okay.
But you can have it, it's just slightly warmed up. You're still going to have a lot of the resistant starch. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah,
Thank
it's a very amazing way to work. I love it. I love the fact that we can do this and it can actually make such a huge difference. And something that's just kind of higher in carbohydrates, like potatoes, can actually turn into something that's like an incredible food that we like really need for our gut. So
Yeah.
it's pretty amazing. Yeah. Annabelle?
Hi, Ellen. Great to see you, and thank you for this.
Sure thing.
I'm wondering, go ahead, my dear.
No. You go.
So I was wondering about the for those of us who are menopausal, like
Hmm.
me, I think that there's also a connection between, the changes in hormone levels and
Yeah.
what's happening in the gut biome.
Yeah.
And what I've been learning as a result of my own journey is that your insulin tolerance or your ability to process insulin changes
Yeah.
with this
Yeah.
change of body. So just curious about if there's any particular resource that you've found informative, helpful in terms of this topic and the, relationship between those things.
Uh-huh.
So I feel like sugar, hormones, gut are kind of appear very connected.
Absolutely. No, 100%. And I think this is the one of the challenges. I think some of it, Annabelle, may be that there's already been a process that's in place for years before of a somewhat leaky gut or some dysbiosis or something. And then with the hormonal changes, like everything seems to explode. And then suddenly you've gained 30 pounds and you're feeling sluggish and, can't sleep or whatever. I mean, all these things that happen. So I think that correcting the gut and working to heal and seal leaky gut is still the first thing that you would do. And I don't think it's necessarily something that just the hormones change and then suddenly all of this happens. I think that there's already sort of a pre-existing kind of thing going in that direction, and then the hormonal shift just like tips it over the edge. And so I do think that we need to think about it that way, because there are women who go through menopause and don't have any of this happen. And it may be that that's for whatever reason they've been able to maintain a healthier gut lining, and maintain better like hormonal integrity. So that's what I would say, is that think about it as a what it means basically is we just have to take better care of ourselves. As these hormonal shifts happen, we have to really clean up pretty much everything. Seems like. I really think as well that the level of toxicity in our in the world right now is a huge part of this, because and one of the things that you can look at in the gut microbiome report, which I really think is a really, really um key thing to be looking at, is called the estrobolome. And the estrobolome is a measurement of how well the gut is detoxifying estrogen, toxic estrogen. And it's basically generally also like shows us how well we're just kind of releasing toxicity in general. So if the estrobolome is high, then that means that you're probably having a harder time releasing toxic estrogen. And you also may have higher levels of toxicity. And you can change the microbiome by taking certain, supplements and doing certain things. You can shift that estrobolome, and then that supports your detoxification in general, because it takes off some of the heavy lifting from the liver. The liver, of course, is connected to all hormonal regulation. So this is one direct way in which we can really assess this in the gut. And I think this particular measurement is really important, because if you have a high estrobolome, then you're going to be more likely to need to be thinking about estrogen sensitive cancers or things like that as well. So this is one very specific place where you can like take incredible action and say, okay, I'm going to change this. When I did my first gut microbiome test, I had my estrobolome was just slightly high, which I am not surprised by, because I have challenges with detoxification genetically. And then 14 months later, my estrobolome was back to normal. So that was really nice to see that shift had happened because of what I was doing and making that shift. So that's like a really empowering thing I think that we can think about for that. So
And that's part of what's tested in this test that you
yeah,
shared with us.
yeah,
Okay,
yeah,
great.
yeah,
Thank you so
yeah.
much.
It's fascinating, isn't it? I love it. It's so empowering, really. There's so much we can do. And the gut really is the root of so much. And I think that's not necessarily widely understood. Um, But I think the reason I really want to focus on the gut microbiome is because by making these changes, we can affect so many positive outcomes in so many other, other places. So yeah. Okay. So if you raise your hand, please, you can just jump in and open your mic. Hi.
Hi, Ellen. Amanda here. Thank you so much
Hi.
for the presentation. I've gone through one of your food programs and I found it very helpful. I'm curious if a lot of this relates to things like fibroids. And
Mhm.
then I'm also curious what you think about juicing, like juicing vegetables, things like that. How that might it got me thinking about pulverized things like almond flour or flax seed, and how
Mhm.
maybe that pulverization of a vegetable by juicing might not be the most beneficial. So I'm just curious what you think in general about juicing.
Yeah, well, juicing is potentially good for a lot of different things. Like it can be very detoxifying, and if that's what you need, if you're doing a specific detox program, um, then that can be really beneficial. But you do lose the fiber, and the fiber is what feeds the gut microbiome in the juice. So
Mhm.
yeah, for something like flax seeds, if you're grinding them, you're not necessarily losing the fiber. I mean, you're breaking it down a little bit in that process, but you're still getting plenty of the fiber. But juicing is different because you're actually pulling the fibers out. So I think that would be a different scenario. Um, so fibroids would be connected to estrogen dominance. Estrogen dominance is a situation where you don't necessarily have too much estrogen per se. It's not like you necessarily have high estrogen. It wouldn't necessarily test high on a test, but you have more than you should in relationship to progesterone. So you've got more estrogen, less progesterone, and that creates estrogen dominance, which creates a whole bunch of conditions. Fibroids can definitely be connected to that, polycystic ovarian syndrome, menstrual issues in general. Um, and yes, I wouldn't be surprised if someone with, fibroids had a higher estrobolome. I had fibroids. That was one of the things that I have dealt with, and I had the higher estrobolome. So yeah, but so generally, there are some women that just have, I think it's oftentimes a genetic thing that has to do with detoxification, but just have a harder time managing estrogen in the body, during the time of menstruation. After menopause, it's a little different because estrogen drops, so much. But still, there can be issues with, too much estrogen or toxic estrogen even after menopause. um, you can still have not very much estrogen, but you can still have not be able to clear the toxic estrogen from the gut. So, yeah.
Mm. Okay, thank you.
I'm going to just jump in. You made a list of items that were helpful, I think, to support the GLP-1, and the yerba mate and curcumin and ginseng was on it. But there was something you said first, and I wasn't sure what that was.
Psyllium.
Psyllium. Oh, okay.
Yeah,
Psyllium. Okay.
that's like it's a fiber that a lot of people take.
Yeah.
And we like these are a lot of these things are like, oh yeah, I kind of already knew that. But it's
Yeah.
it's nice to know that which of these foods that we may have heard of before are specifically helping with that in that particular way. So
So even if you cook it like I have a bread recipe, you put it in, maybe it was one of the ones that you
yeah, the
sent out.
life-changing loaf of bread. Yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely, yeah, yep. That's
Yeah.
fits fine if it's cooked. It's just a source of fiber. So yeah,
Great.
yeah.
And then the other question, how do you spell astrobal, whatever the word you're saying?
Estrogen.
Astrolobium? Is it an A or an E?
Um,
Astro, oh,
ESTROBOLOME.
putting in chat. Okay.
Estrobolome. Yeah.
Thank you. Nice to see you.
Sure thing. Absolutely. If anybody is having any troubles with microbiome labs, there is something strange that sometimes happens on their website, with registration. Just let me know, just send me an email, and I can see if I can get it sorted out. I don't know why it happens to some number of people. I think it has something to do with cookies on the site or something like that, but some percentage of people have that challenge. So I just want to say if you do want to get a test and um you want to check it out, then then do that. Yeah. Okay, I'm going to see if there's other questions that I missed here. Jody, yes, the microbiome test includes Akkermansia levels. So the slides that I showed you guys was everything that those were all screenshotted from different microbiome tests. The sessions with me are 100 for the introductory consultation, which is an hour, and the follow-up sessions are 90. And I then offer a package of, if you do like 6 sessions or 12 sessions, and you pay in full, then I'll do a discount, for that if you want to do it, pay it in full. So I think for what's out there on the market, these are very, very reasonable rates for private sessions. A lot of times you'd have to be paying a lot of money to doing, sort of working with a functional medicine practitioner. So I do try to keep my rates reasonable so people can afford it. Patricia, how much berberine? I'm not going to make any specific recommendations as far as amounts of anything for anybody on this kind of call, because it would be something that would be, specific to the to you individually. The gut microbiome test is $349, and it includes so basically I get to consult with the clinicians at Microbiome Labs as part of the test. So what that means is that I I don't get paid for that time, but I take an hour and I go through your health history and I go through your gut report, and we together put together a protocol and discuss, any tricky things that might be going on for you or any specific considerations or anything like that. So part of what you're paying for in the test is actually the, incredible wealth of information and data that these clinicians have. They of course have been in the field for a long time and are basically, immediately accessing all the new research that's coming out about the gut microbiome and stuff. So I love talking to them because I always learn so much because they're right in the field, thick of it. So any other questions? All righty. Well, it's wonderful to chat with you all. Thank you for putting up with my slightly scratchy voice. Um, and yeah, if you want to do any work together, I'd love to do that. If not, that's totally fine too. I really just wanted to offer this call because I felt inspired to share the alternatives because I have had a few clients who've been using these weight loss drugs and they've had really bad side effects. And, I just want to give people an alternative option and think about what else it is that we can do. So I really hope you take this information and run with it and that it, brings some benefit to your life. Okay. Take care, everyone. Bye-bye for now.